there, everyone. Welcome back to GME Compass, where we guide GME professionals with real insight and experience while turning GME complexity into clarity and control. Today, we are continuing our PEC series with a topic that I think is incredibly important operationally as well as strategically. What program outcomes and trends should PEC actually be tracking? This presentation is really about helping programs move beyond simply reviewing data and instead using data to drive meaningful continuous improvement for your program. Because honestly, many PECs are collecting enormous amounts of information, but they're struggling to determine what actually matters, what trends are actually meaningful, what should trigger discussion, and how to turn data into action. Before we begin, we have no financial disclosures. All content that's shared today comes from the broad continuum of our personal experience in GME. This presentation reflects our own knowledge, observations, and operational experience, not any current or past GME roles that we hold. And then by the end of this session, participants should be able to identify which program outcomes PEC should prioritize, distinguish meaningful trends from isolated data points, and use PEC data to support continuous improvement and accreditation readiness. So our goal today is really to make PEC feel less overwhelming and more operationally useful. If you've been following in our series, this presentation really builds upon the previous two videos. First, we discussed PEC versus CCC, the key differences between the two. Following that, we talked about how to structure an effective PEC agenda and prepare for your meeting. Now we're going to focus on what the PEC should actually be monitoring. That is where PEC becomes operationally powerful in the accreditation process, because once a program understands the role of the PEC, how to run it effectively, and what data truly matters, that's where continuous improvement becomes much more intentional and strategic. This is where PEC becomes powerful, not because PEC collects data, but because PEC learns how to interpret patterns and drive program improvement. One of the most important things to understand is that ACGME expects continuous program evaluation. PEC is not intended to function as a once-a-year compliance meeting. PEC should really function like an early warning system. It's your red, yellow, and green flags. Strong PECs identify your patterns, risks, recurring concerns, as well as your opportunities for improvement. So before your issues become citations, good programs are going to review your data. Great programs are going to actually act on the trends. And then this directly ties into your APE, your annual program evaluation, continuous improvement, and broader program oversight responsibilities. The goal is not simply to check the PEC box. The goal is to continuously evaluate whether the program is functioning in an effective way. So under the Common Program Requirements, PEC oversight responsibilities are extremely broad, and that's somewhat intentional. PEC is not just reviewing resident performance. PEC should be evaluating your curriculum effectiveness, your resident outcomes, faculty development, program quality, your board pass rates, graduate outcomes, your survey data, and your program aims. This is why the PEC should be viewed as a program effectiveness committee, not simply a resident review committee. One of the most common PEC mistakes that we see programs is tracking too much information without determining what is actually meaningful. Too much data can often result in no prioritization, no discussion, and ultimately no action. PEC should focus on trends and patterns, risk indicators, and opportunities. One of the most important lines in this entire presentation, I feel like I need my own t-shirt line now because put this on a t-shirt. Data without action is just documentation. Collecting data alone does not improve programs. Using data to guide your decisions does. So let's focus on section 1, which is your resident performance outcomes. And this is where it becomes really important to understand the distinction between your aggregate program trends and your individual learner management. PEC should absolutely review resident performance trends. But the key word here, trends. Examples include milestone trends, in-training exam performance trends, board pass rates, remediation patterns, scholarly activity, procedure or case log concerns, and your attrition trends. But there's the important distinction. PEC reviews aggregate trends and patterns. CCC evaluates individual residents. For example, if multiple residents struggle in the same competency area across multiple years, that could indicate a lot of things. It could indicate gaps in your curriculum, supervision concerns, rotation issues, education inconsistencies. That's when things move over to a PEC discussion. PEC should analyze why, not just what. Strong PEC discussions go deeper than scores went down. Instead, they ask, why are the scores declining? Is this an isolated incident? Is it recurring? Are there multiple cohorts that are affected? Is there a systems issue? Examples of concerning trends might include declining milestones, performance across cohorts, repeated rotation complaints, worsening exam trends, professionalism patterns, or concerns. And this is where PEC becomes strategic rather than reactive. And then section 2, which is your curriculum and your educational quality. So as we move into this, it's important to think about, because PEC is also responsible for determining, is the curriculum actually work? Some important areas that the Program Evaluation Committee might actually track include rotation evaluations, didactic attendance, curriculum gaps, board prep effectiveness, simulation utilization, and scholarly curriculum outcomes. But again, the goal is not simply collecting the numbers. The real question becomes, are residents prepared? Are educational gaps recurring? Does the curriculum align with the program aims? If multiple residents are repeatedly identifying the same educational gaps, that likely represents a program issue, not an isolated learner issue. PEC discussions should remain curious and analytical, not judgmental. Questions might include, are the rotations consistently receiving poor evaluations? Are there recurring supervision concerns? Are workload issues affecting education? Is service overwhelming learning opportunities? This is something that I would always be raising my hand and bringing to everyone's attention. Is as we would make changes or we would bring concerns to our program evaluation committee or in other spaces, or if we were applying to expand our residency, or if I was helping another department to write their application for a new program, I would constantly be repeating myself and asking the question, not because I needed to repeat myself, because it's important to keep it on the forefront of the discussion as you're writing your applications or you're having your discussion. It's important to be repeating it just to keep reminding the group, is this a service need or is this an educational need? Because that really is extremely important in these perspectives. You always want to make sure that you're never putting service over education. So repeated concerns matter more than isolated complaints. One difficult rotation evaluation isn't necessarily alarming, but recurring patterns over time deserve PEC attention. PEC should also evaluate the broader learning environment, which includes supervision, patient safety, workload balance, professionalism, as well as the educational culture. This ties closely into the clinical learning environment expectations. Often, programs recognize concerning patterns long before citations occur. The question becomes, is the PEC responding proactively? So now, let's shift into faculty and operational program trends, because PEC evaluates program effectiveness, not only resident effectiveness. PEC should track faculty-related trends such as faculty evaluations, their participation in education, scholarly activity, mentorship engagement, conference attendance, and faculty development participation. Again, recurring patterns matter. Something that we were in the process of creating in our department was creating faculty report cards. And through creating these faculty report cards, it was a way to have a snapshot or a faculty dashboard, so to speak, in their teaching engagement and portfolio. So you could really see. So these report cards was an at a glance way that one, you can see each faculty member, whether they're core or non-core, and to see how many lectures they're giving. Are they participating in interviews, mock oral boards, simulation, anything, giving lectures throughout the year, M&Ms? Are they participating in scholarly activity? Are they participating in resident research? But then what is their evaluation completion rates? All these different types of things you could see in at a glance view for each person. And then you can also kind of see it for everyone. And then you're also transparent. You're giving back to them so they can see what the expectations, whether it's core or a faculty role, and they can see how they're doing, because maybe they might, as I had said in the previous video, just choosing one thing or one piece of information that you want to make for your goal to improve on, they might want to do the same. And by giving them that transparent information, it helps to break it down for them. And then if residents repeatedly identify concerns involving things such as teaching, supervision, accessibility, or professionalism, those also become really important PEC discussions. Recruitment data tells a much bigger story than many programs even begin to realize. PECs might review fill rates, rank list movement, diversity trends, attrition, transfer patterns, and retention after graduation. These trends often reveal culture concerns, reputation concerns, wellness issues, or educational dissatisfaction long before problems even begin to emerge. PECs should also pay attention to wellness and burnout indicators. Examples might include survey comments, workload concerns, professionalism escalation trends, or wellness resource utilization. But importantly, programs do not need complicated wellness dashboards to identify meaningful trends. I feel like this is something that's really important for the program manager and the program coordinator community to hear, because you hear, one of my old program directors used to say, "Your wellness is making me unwell," because there's so many things that we do throughout the year and our roles are so demanding. And when it was the uptick of recognizing and implementing wellness activities and resources and things, it felt very overwhelming as program leadership to really roll out, if we're being very honest. So you can assess and look at and review your wellness resource utilizations without having complicated dashboards and things that are really contributing to the program coordinator and manager burnout. The goal really truly is awareness and responsiveness, not creating more unnecessary tracking systems. It doesn't mean that each and every data point that you're assessing or you're looking at has to have its own tracking system. Please don't think that that's what we're saying at all. You want to have your most bang for your buck. It's really your important, your big, your high yield things. Other things you just want to assess that they're happening, that the systems are being utilized, that the resources are being tapped into. And then next, accreditation and risk monitoring. Many citations aren't surprises. We all know this, right? Programs are often cited for patterns that they already knew existed, especially your program coordinators and your program managers. We kind of are like the psychic mediums where problems with residents might come up, problems with the program, citations, AFIs, and we're like, I could have told you that was coming. I'm surprised it took that long for this to come, right? Because we often kind of have that crystal ball where we see so much more deeply into things. They shouldn't be surprises by the time that they come. Their programs are often cited for patterns that they already knew existed, for things like persistent survey concerns, board pass rates, recurring faculty issues. We talked about a lot of these things. PECs really should function as an accreditation protection strategy. So, strong PEC oversight identifies concerns early enough for programs to intervene. This is a really important 2 slides because one slide would be too busy. But if you could only track 10 things These are probably the areas that I would prioritize. And I'm going to read all 10 of them. Resident survey trends, faculty survey trends, milestone aggregate trends, your board pass rates, your recruitment and fill outcomes, attrition, rotation evaluation trends, scholarly activity, faculty participation, and action plan follow through. And I read them because I think that they're extremely important. If you were to ask me, this would be my top 10. Notice these are all trend-based bullet points. They're all operational and they're all improvement focused. They're not isolated individual data points. This also might be one of the most important slides in the presentation because the goal is improvement, not documentation. So PEC should move through a continuous cycle: data, trend, discussion, action, follow-up. Strong PECs generate measurable action plans, accountability timelines, and reassessment. That's where continuous improvement truly begins to happen. Strong PEC documentation should demonstrate your reviewed data, your identified trends, discussed root causes, created action plans, assigned responsibility, and planned reassessment. So avoid vague statements like PEC reviewed the data and no concerns were identified. That tells nothing about the quality of the discussion. That tells nothing about what was reviewed, any of the causes that were determined, and where you're going from here. PEC should not live in one annual meeting. Strong programs operationalize PEC throughout the academic year. Quarterly reviews might include something like your surveys, your rotation concerns, and your resident trends. Biannual reviews might include something like curriculum effectiveness and your faculty trends. And then annually, you might want to include your APE, strategic planning, and your broader program evaluation. Continuous monitoring reduces APE overwhelm tremendously. So one process helps to support another so that they both are collectively less burdensome. So they complement each other and they work together like siblings that get along versus this. PEC should focus on trends, outcomes, risk indicators, program effectiveness, and your action plan progress. What it should not focus on is random isolated data points, individual remediation management, CCC responsibilities, or any unnecessary redundant information. Focus on what drives your improvement. The best PECs do not simply review data. They use the data to improve the program. And ultimately, PEC is where compliance becomes strategy. That is really the heart and soul of this presentation. So with that, thank you so much for joining us in today's episode. If you found this video helpful, please like the video. Please subscribe to GME Compass on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. You can also check out our toolkits and digital downloads on Etsy. We'd love to hear from you in the comments on what outcomes and trends has your PEC found to be the most valuable to track in your program. Thank you again for being here. We'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.